Back in 1939, World War II kicked off when Germany, under the Nazis, decided to invade Poland. Within a short span of time, Great Britain and France were pulled in, and what started as a battle over one country blew up into a massive conflict that spread all over Europe and turned into a full-on world war. Now, in any war, there are always prisoners, people who get caught by the enemy. The Nazis, led by Hitler, got a notorious reputation for the awful ways they treated these prisoners of war, especially spies. They were all about extreme nationalism, and anyone even thinking about betraying that idea faced punishments that were beyond cruel. Today, we're going to take a close look at the terrifying ways Nazis treated their prisoners. From being left to starve to the nightmares of concentration camps, the stuff they did will shock you. Stick with us as we dive into how the Nazis dealt with prisoners of war. And hey, before we jump in, don't forget to hit subscribe and click that bell so you're always up to date with our latest videos. Let's get into it. Why were the Nazis so barbaric? Before we dive into the specific ways the Nazis punished prisoners, it's important to understand just how and why they could be so incredibly cruel. One shocking example of their barbarity was the introduction of the gas van during Nazi Germany. This wasn't just any van. It was a mobile gas chamber, an evil invention used by the Einsatzgruppen, the Nazis' deadly paramilitary squads. The prisoners would be told they're just being transported somewhere, only to be crammed into the back of a van. Then the doors shut, sealing the prisoners in. At the back, there used to be an exhaust pipe, and that's where the horror would start. The engine would be turned on, and in about 20 minutes, it's all over. The back doors would be opened again, but only to drag out bodies. This horrendous method came about because Nazi soldiers themselves started feeling the weight of their heinous acts. Many turned to alcohol to numb the pain of the atrocities they were committing, often drinking just to get through their duties. Heinrich L. Himmler, a top Nazi official, thought up the gas van to ease the mental burden on these soldiers. With the gas van, no one had to pull a trigger. It was seen as a less inhumane way to kill. Can you believe it? As time went on, this method became easier for the SS personnel to digest because they stopped seeing their victims as humans. Prisoners were stripped of their identities, head shaved, dressed identically, and presented as less than human. But the groundwork for such extreme cruelty didn't appear overnight. The Holocaust and the barbarity of the Nazis grew from the destruction of lawful society in Germany, years of unending propaganda by the Nazi regime, and persecution of anyone who dared to oppose them. As one group after another was attacked and suppressed, the German people found themselves under the rule of someone who didn't just do evil, but encouraged it in others. This atmosphere of fear, hatred, and lawlessness was the perfect breeding ground for the horrors that would follow. Starvation. One of the most heart-wrenching methods the Nazis used to punish prisoners was starvation. Imagine being singled out, not for something you did, but because someone else decided to escape. In 1941, this was a reality for countless innocent people in the camps. Following an escape, the camp authorities would pick hostages from the escapees' block or work group. These chosen few were then thrown into the dark, grim cells of Block 11, left without any food and left to starve unless the escapee was somehow recaptured. But it's obvious. In every recorded instance, these hostages met the same tragic end. They starved to death. For example, during the summer of 1941, Franciscan Maximilian Kolbe stepped forward to take the place of a man selected as a hostage. Kolbe's act of sacrifice was a beam of humanity in the darkest of times. He survived nearly 2 weeks in that starvation cell before his life was cruelly ended with a lethal injection. By 1943, while the camp authorities randomly continued to use starvation as a form of execution, they eventually stopped. Perhaps even they found the practice too barbaric to continue, or maybe it was for more practical reasons. Regardless, abandoning this method didn't erase the suffering it caused. Block 11. Block 11 in the camp was a nightmare turned into reality. This place was where the Nazis carried out some of their most brutal punishments for things like spying, suspected sabotage, trying to escape, or even just talking to civilians. The unlucky ones found themselves in regular cells, dark cells, or the dreaded standing cells, each more terrifying than the last. The regular cells might let you sleep on wooden bunks, but that was a luxury compared to the dark cells, where prisoners were left to sleep on the cold, hard floor with barely any light coming through tiny vents. These dark confinements could last from days to weeks, often ending in death by starvation. Block 11 was also used to extract information from spies, with both physical and mental torture involved. But perhaps the most horrific were the standing cells. Imagine being squeezed into a tiny space, less than a square meter, with 3 other people. The only air you'd get came through a tiny hole, and the only way in or out was a small hatch near the floor. And after spending the night standing, you were expected to go out and work the next day. This cruel punishment could go on for weeks. The post. Another chilling method the Nazis used to torture prisoners of war and spies was known as the post. This was torture designed to break the human spirit and body. Carried out in the loft of Block 11 or the yard outside, the cruelty of this method was unimaginable. Here's how it went down. The victims' hands were tied behind their back, and they were then hung from a post, feet dangling, unable to touch the ground. This torture method wasn't quick. It lasted for hours, 1 agonizing hour at a time. The pain was so intense that losing consciousness was a mercy compared to the pain of being awake. But the aftermath was just as cruel as the punishment itself. The intense strain often caused the tendons in the shoulder to rupture, leaving the victim unable to move their arms. This injury wasn't just physical, it marked them as unfit for work, putting them at an increased risk of being sent to the gas chamber. Hangings. Hanging was another brutal method the Nazis used to punish prisoners of war and spies who were of no interest anymore, but it was also a tool for spreading fear among everyone in the camp. These weren't quiet, hidden affairs. Hangings were publicly done, often carried out during roll call with all the prisoners forced to watch. This was the Nazis' twisted way of warning everyone, step out of line and this could be you. One of the darkest days came on July 19, 1943, when 12 prisoners from a surveyor's labor detail were hanged in front of their fellow inmates. This cruel act was the Nazis' revenge for the escape of 3 prisoners from the same group. But it wasn't just about punishment, it was about sending a chilling message of control. Even in the camp's final days, the hangings continued. On December 30th, 1944, 5 prisoners who had tried and failed to escape 2 months earlier were hanged in the main camp. Not long after, on January 6th, 4 Jewish women were executed for their role in supplying explosives for a Sonderkommando mutiny. These acts of resistance, even if unsuccessful, showed incredible bravery in the face of certain death. The gas chambers. The most horrifying method of punishment, or more accurately, mass murder, carried out by the Nazis was the use of gas chambers. Auschwitz, above everything else it was, has served as a grim center of extermination. Historians estimate that around 1.1 million souls were lost within its confines in less than 5 years. The process was chillingly systematic. Men, women, and children selected for death were led to the gas chambers, some by foot and others too weak to walk and transported by trucks. Upon arrival, they were deceived into thinking they were just going through a disinfection process before entering the camp. They were instructed to take off their clothes for what they were told was a bath. However, once they were undressed and pushed into the gas chambers, the doors were locked behind them, and Zyklon B gas was released. After the horrific act was done, the prisoners from the Sonderkommando, tasked with handling the bodies, would then drag the lifeless corpses out. They cut women's hair, removed any metal from teeth, and stripped away jewelry. What followed was a disturbing process where bodies were burned in pits, on pyres, or in crematorium furnaces. Any bones not fully burned were ground into powder and disposed of in rivers, ponds, or used cruelly as fertilizer or landfill. The chilling punishments and torture methods employed by the Nazis serve as a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty. This grim chapter in our history highlights the darkest corners of the human heart and mind. We hope this video has shed light on these harrowing events and provided you with valuable insights. If you found it informative, please give us a like and consider sharing it with others who share a passion for understanding our past. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insights into history. We'll be bringing more thought-provoking content your way soon.